The message came 3 days before Christmas. I remember staring at my phone, reading it again and again, like maybe the words would change if I blinked enough times. My mom said, "We're not celebrating Christmas with you this year." No explanation, no apology, just that. I didn't reply right away, because the truth is, that wasn't the part that hurt the most. It was what came after. We think it's better if you stay where you are. Stay where I was, like I wasn't part of the family anymore, like I was a problem they didn't want to deal with. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my phone so tight my fingers started to hurt. The room felt colder than usual, even though the heater was on. I had spent weeks planning that trip. Weeks. Saving money from my part-time job, choosing gifts for everyone, even wrapping them carefully so they would look perfect under the tree. I bought my mom a soft shawl in her favorite color. I bought my younger brother a gaming headset he had been talking about for months. And for my dad, I got him a simple watch. Nothing expensive, but something I thought he would wear every day. I thought, this Christmas would be different. I thought maybe things would feel normal again. But I was wrong. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, quiet, empty. And then slowly, memories started coming back, like they always do when something breaks inside you. I wasn't always the one they left out. There was a time when I was the center of everything. At least, that's what I believed when I was younger. I was the first daughter, the one my mom used to dress up in matching outfits, the one my dad used to carry on his shoulders. But things changed. They didn't change suddenly. They changed slowly, so slowly that I didn't even notice at first. It started when my brother was born. Everyone said it was normal. He's the baby, they would say. Of course he needs more attention. And I understood that. I really did. I helped my mom with him. I held him, fed him, even stayed up some nights when he wouldn't stop crying. I thought, that's what older sisters do. But as the years went by, something else changed. The attention never came back to me. Not really. It was always about him. His school, his problems, his dreams. And me? I learned to stay quiet. I learned to not ask for too much. I learned that being good meant being invisible. By the time I turned 16, I already knew my place in that house. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the priority. I was just there. Still, I loved them. That never changed. Even when things got harder. Even when my mom started comparing me to others. Why can't you be more like your cousin? Why are your grades not as good as before? Why are you always so quiet? I wanted to tell her that I was quiet because no one was listening. But I never said it. I just nodded. And tried harder. Always harder. When I left for college, I thought things would finally change. I thought distance might make them miss me. I thought maybe they would call more, ask about my life, care about what I was going through. But the calls became shorter, less frequent. Sometimes weeks would pass without hearing from them. And when I called, it always felt rushed, like they had something more important to do. I told myself they were just busy. That's what I always told myself. Until that message. We're not celebrating Christmas with you this year. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about everything. Every ignored call, every forgotten birthday, every time I felt like I didn't belong in my own family. I finally replied after almost an hour. Okay, just one word, because what else was I supposed to say? Beg? Ask why? Pretend it didn't hurt? No, I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. A few minutes later, my mom replied, "Good, it's better this way." That sentence, it did something to me. Something quiet, something deep, something that didn't break me, but changed me. I put my phone down. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying. I stopped trying to be the good daughter, the understanding one, the one who always forgives. Because I realized something in that moment. If they could leave me out so easily, then maybe I needed to stop holding on so tightly. That night, I took out the gifts I had bought for them. I placed them all on my bed, and I just looked at them for a long time. Each one had a memory attached to it. A hope, a small piece of love. And suddenly, they didn't feel right anymore. Not for them. Not after what they did. I didn't know it yet. But that was the beginning of everything. Not the end. The beginning. Because for the first time, I wasn't going to chase their love anymore. I was going to do something else. Something they would never expect. Something quiet. Something patient. Something that would take time. And when it finally happened, they would understand exactly what they had lost. But by then, it would be too late. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because my mind wouldn't let me sleep. That message, it kept repeating in my head. We think it's better if you stay where you are. I sat up in bed and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much. Just a bed, a desk, a tiny kitchen. But it was mine. Every corner of it. Every little thing inside it. And suddenly for the first time, I didn't feel small in that space. I felt steady, like something inside me had shifted during the night. Not healed, not even close, but clearer. I got up, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. Outside, people were already starting their day. Shops opening, cars passing, life moving forward, like it always does. And I realized something simple. My life didn't stop just because they decided to step out of it. That thought stayed with me all day. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me direction. By afternoon, I did something I hadn't planned. I opened my closet and pulled out the bag with all the Christmas gifts. I placed it on the table and slowly took everything out. The shawl for my mom, the headset for my brother, the watch for my dad. I held each item in my hands again. But this time, I wasn't imagining their reactions. I wasn't picturing their smiles. Instead, I was asking myself one question. Do they deserve this? And for the first time in my life, I didn't automatically say yes. That felt strange, almost wrong, because I had spent years believing that love meant giving, no matter what. But now I wasn't so sure. I sat there for a long time. Then quietly, I reached for my phone. Not to call them, not to message them, but to search for something else. A local shelter. I didn't know why at first. It just came to me. Maybe because I didn't want those gifts to sit in my room and remind me of everything I lost. Or maybe because a small part of me wanted to give them to someone who would actually feel happy receiving them. After a few minutes, I found one. A small place not too far from my apartment. They took in women and children who had nowhere else to go. I read through their page slowly. Stories of people starting over. People who had lost more than I had. And yet, they were still trying. Still hoping. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I packed the gifts back into the bag. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not painful. Just quiet. That evening I walked to the shelter. The air was cold and the streets were decorated with lights. Everywhere I looked, people were preparing for Christmas. Families shopping together. Children laughing. And for once, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I just felt separate. When I reached the shelter, I hesitated for a second before knocking. I wasn't used to doing things like this. I wasn't the kind of person who walked into places like that. But something inside me pushed me forward. The door opened, and a woman greeted me with a soft smile. I explained that I had some gifts I wanted to donate. She thanked me and invited me inside. The place was simple, warm, quiet. There were a few children sitting in one corner, drawing and talking softly. And for a moment, I just stood there watching them. One little girl looked up at me. She had big, curious eyes, and she smiled. Just like that. No questions, no expectations, just a simple smile. I felt something in my chest tighten. I walked over and handed the bag to the woman. She looked inside and her expression changed. Not in a big dramatic way, just softer, more grateful. "These are really nice," she said gently. I nodded. "They were meant for my family," I replied. I don't know why I said that. Maybe because I needed someone to know. She didn't ask anything else. She just placed a hand on my arm for a second. And somehow, that small gesture meant more than all the words my family hadn't said. Before I left, the little girl came up to me. "Are these for us?" she asked. I smiled back. Yes. Her face lit up in a way I can't fully explain. It wasn't just happiness. It was something deeper, something real. And in that moment, I realized something important. Love shouldn't feel like begging. It shouldn't feel like waiting. It shouldn't feel like being left behind. That night when I returned home, my apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what my family thought of me. I wasn't replaying old conversations. I wasn't trying to figure out what I did wrong. I was just there, present. And then my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was my brother. I stared at his name for a few seconds before answering. "Hello?" I said. "Hey," he replied casually. "Mom said you're not coming for Christmas." I let out a small breath. "No, I'm not." There was a short pause. Then he said something that made my hand tighten around the phone. "Yeah, it's probably better. Things are kind of busy here anyway." Busy, of course they were. "They always are," I said quietly. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he changed the topic. By the way, did you already send my gift? I closed my eyes for a second. There it was. Not how are you, not are you okay, just the gift. No, I said. Another pause. Oh, so, you're not sending it? No. My voice was calm, steady, not angry. Just clear. He sounded slightly annoyed. Why not? I opened my eyes and looked around my apartment again. At the empty table, at the quiet space that was finally mine, and I answered honestly, because I gave it to someone who needed it more. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he let out a small laugh. Wow, okay, that's different. Different. Maybe it was, or maybe it was just the first time I wasn't doing what they expected. We ended the call shortly after. No argument, no drama, just distance. But this time, the distance didn't scare me. It felt right. That night, I sat by the window again, looking at the lights outside. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. I wasn't hoping for another message, because deep down, I already knew. They weren't going to change. Not now, not soon, maybe not ever. So instead of waiting, I started thinking, planning, not revenge in the loud, angry way, not something that would hurt them immediately. No, something quieter, something that would grow over time, something that would make them realize, slowly, exactly what they had pushed away. And this time, I wasn't going to stop halfway. I wasn't going to forgive too early. I wasn't going to go back just because they called. No, this time, I was choosing myself. And that was only the beginning. The days leading up to Christmas passed quietly. No calls, no messages, no last-minute change of plans. And somehow, that silence said everything. I went to work like usual, came home like usual, made my own meals, sat by the window at night. But inside, something was still moving, still changing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and steady. On Christmas Eve, I didn't decorate. I didn't put up a tree. I didn't play music. I just cleaned my apartment, made a simple dinner, and sat down with a blanket wrapped around me. For a moment, I thought maybe I would cry, because this was the first Christmas I was completely alone. No family, no traditions, no noise, just me. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt calm. Not happy, not sad. Just calm. And that scared me a little, because I realized I was getting used to being without them. At around 9 p.m., my phone lit up. A message from my mom. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Merry Christmas. That was it. No warmth, no heart. Just 2 words. I read it once, then again, and I noticed something strange. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Maybe because it felt expected, like something she sent out of habit. Not love. I didn't reply right away. I put my phone down and leaned back into the couch. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What do I actually want from them? Not what I was used to, not what I hoped for, but what I truly needed. The answer came slowly. I wanted respect. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to matter, not just when it was convenient. And the truth was, they had never really given me that. Not fully, not consistently. So why was I still holding on to the idea that they would suddenly change? That thought stayed with me for a long time. Then I picked up my phone again, opened her message, and instead of typing Merry Christmas back like I always did, I typed something else. Thank you. I hope you have a good holiday. Simple, polite, distant. I read it once before sending it. And when I did, it felt like closing a door. Not slamming it, not locking it, just gently closing it. After that, I turned off my phone. Not in anger, just by choice. I didn't want to wait for another message, another empty sentence. I wanted that night to belong to me. So I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the world celebrate. Without me. But this time, it didn't feel like I was being left out. It felt like I had stepped away. There's a difference. A quiet but important difference. The next morning I woke up later than usual. No alarm, no plans. Just sunlight coming through the curtains. For a moment I forgot what day it was. Then it hit me. Christmas. I reached for my phone, half expecting something. Maybe a message, maybe a call. But there was nothing. And strangely, I smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't disappointed. I got up, stretched, and decided to do something different. Something I had never done before. I got dressed, left my apartment, and went back to the shelter. I didn't know if they would even be open. but I went anyway. When I arrived, the door was unlocked. Inside, there was a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just a few people sitting together, sharing food, talking quietly. The same woman from before saw me and smiled. "You came back," she said. I nodded. I didn't want to be alone today. She didn't ask anything else. She just made space for me. And for the next few hours, I sat with people who didn't know me, people who didn't expect anything from me, people who weren't comparing me, judging me, or ignoring me. And somehow, that felt more like a family than anything I had experienced in years. At one point, the little girl from before ran up to me. She was wearing the headset box like a crown on her head, laughing. "It's mine," she said proudly. I couldn't help but laugh too. "Yes, it is." She sat next to me and started talking about all the things she wanted to do. Games she wanted to play, stories she wanted to hear, and I listened. Really listened. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, and in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't empty. I wasn't broken. I had just been giving my energy to the wrong place. Later that day, when I returned home, I felt tired. But it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something real, something meaningful. I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. And that's when the idea came. Not suddenly. Not like a spark. More like a quiet thought that had been building for a while. What if I stopped waiting for them completely? Not just emotionally, but in every way. What if I build a life so full, so stable, so strong, that their absence no longer feels like a loss? That thought didn't feel like revenge. Not in the way people usually think of it. It felt like freedom. But I knew something else too. If I really did that, if I truly moved forward without them, there would come a day when they would notice. A day when they would realize I wasn't coming back the same way. And when that day came, they would have to face something they had avoided for years, me, not the quiet version, not the one who waited, but the one who finally understood her worth. And I knew that moment would matter, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I wanted them to see the truth they ignored for so long. And this time, I wouldn't soften it for them. I wouldn't make it easier. I wouldn't pretend everything was okay. No. When that moment came, I would be ready, and they wouldn't be. After Christmas, everything became quiet again. Not the painful kind of quiet I used to feel. Not the kind that made me check my phone every few minutes. This was different. This was a quiet I chose. Days turned into weeks. And for the first time in my life, I stopped measuring time based on when my family would call. Or if they would call at all. I focused on my work, picked up extra shifts, started saving more seriously. Not for a visit home, not for gifts, but for myself, for my future. I changed small things first. I rearranged my apartment, got rid of things I didn't need, bought a small plant and placed it by the window. It sounds simple, but every little change felt like I was building something new. Piece by piece, and slowly, I started to feel proud of the way I handled everything, proud that I didn't beg, proud that I didn't break. Of course, the silence from them didn't last forever. It never does. About 3 weeks after Christmas, my phone rang. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. My heart didn't race the way it used to. My hands didn't shake. I just looked at her name. Then I answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded normal. Too normal, like nothing had happened. "Hi, how are you?" I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "I'm fine," I replied. "How are you?" "Oh, we're good. Just busy, you know." Busy, that word again. I leaned back against the wall. "Yes, I know." There was a small pause. Then she said something that made everything very clear. "You didn't call on Christmas. Not we missed you. Not we're sorry. Just a quiet accusation." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I answered calmly. "You told me not to come." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't mean it like that," she said. I didn't respond right away, because I wanted to be careful. Not emotional, not reactive, just honest. "How did you mean it?" I asked. She hesitated. "I just thought it would be easier this year." Easier for who? I could feel the old version of me wanting to step in, to make it okay, to say, "I understand." But I didn't, not this time. "Easier for you," I said quietly. She didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt something shift again. Not inside me, inside her. Because for the first time, I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't making excuses for her. I was just stating the truth. She changed the topic quickly. Anyway, your brother was a little upset you didn't send his gift. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was again. The same pattern, the same expectations. I opened my eyes and spoke clearly. I told him why. Yes, but still, he was expecting something. I sat up straight, and I was expecting to spend Christmas with my family. The words came out calm, not loud, not angry, but they landed exactly where they needed to. She went quiet again, and this time, it felt different. Not dismissive, not distracted, just quiet. I didn't realize you felt that strongly, she said after a moment. I almost laughed. Not out loud, but inside. Of course she didn't realize. Because she never asked. I didn't say anything before, I replied. That doesn't mean I didn't feel it. Another long pause. Then she sighed. Well, we can plan something for later. Maybe you can visit next month. There it was. The solution. The quick fix. The way things always went back to normal without ever being addressed. But I wasn't going to accept that. Not anymore. I'm not sure, I said. She sounded surprised. What do you mean? I mean, I need time. Time for what? For myself. The words felt steady, grounded, real. She didn't like that. I could hear it in her tone. You're making this a bigger issue than it needs to be. And there it was. The dismissal. The minimization. The exact reason I had stayed quiet for so long. But this time, I didn't shrink. I don't think I am, I said calmly. I think I'm finally seeing it clearly. She didn't respond. Not right away, and in that silence, I realized something important. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't bend, the one who didn't rush to fix things, the one who didn't accept half effort and call it love. We ended the call shortly after. No resolution, no apology. But something had changed. Not just in me, in the space between us. That space was no longer filled with my effort alone. And without that, there was nothing to hide the truth anymore. Days passed again, and this time, I didn't expect her to call back quickly. I knew she needed time too. Time to process. Time to decide whether she wanted to understand. Or ignore it like before. But I didn't wait. I kept moving forward. I signed up for a short course related to my field. Something I had been putting off for years. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I was always focused on everything else. Everyone else now. That focus was mine. I studied in the evenings, worked during the day, and slowly, I started building something bigger. Not just a life, a future, a version of myself that didn't depend on anyone's approval. And with every step forward, I felt lighter, stronger, more certain. I didn't know when my family would fully realize what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. When they did, they wouldn't be able to ignore it. Because this time, I wasn't just stepping back, I was moving on. And the distance between us was no longer something I feared. It was something I chose. A month passed. Then another. Life didn't slow down for me anymore. It moved, and I moved with it. My days had a rhythm now. Work in the morning, classes in the evening, quiet nights where I studied, cooked for myself, and sometimes just sat with my thoughts. But those thoughts were different now. They weren't heavy. They didn't circle around the same old questions. They were focused, clear, forward. I stopped checking my phone out of habit, stopped waiting for messages that used to control my mood, and slowly, I started noticing something unexpected. I was happy, not in a loud, obvious way, not the kind people post about, but a calm, steady kind of happiness, the kind that stays with you even when nothing special is happening. One evening after class, I walked home under the streetlights. The air was cool. The streets were quiet, and I realized I didn't feel alone. I felt complete. That thought stayed with me, and it scared me a little, because if I was okay without them, then what did that mean for everything I had held on to for so long? A few days later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my dad. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks, maybe months if I was being honest. He wasn't someone who called often, so when I saw his name, I paused. Then I answered. Hello? Hi, he said. His voice was calm, careful. How are you? I'm good, I replied. How are you? We're fine. There was a short silence. Then he said something that caught me off guard. Your mom told me about your conversation. Of course she did. I leaned against the wall. I figured. Another pause. Then he cleared his throat slightly. She thinks you're upset. I let out a small breath. I am. At least I was honest. That seemed to surprise him. You don't usually say things like that, he said. I know. And why are you upset? He asked. For a moment, I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. Not emotionally, not defensively. Just truthfully. Because I felt like I didn't matter, I said. The words were simple, but they carried years of silence behind them. He didn't respond right away, and I imagined him standing somewhere in the house, thinking. Trying to understand something he had never really looked at before. That's not true, he said finally. You do matter. I closed my eyes for a second. I know you think that, I replied. But that's not how it feels. Another silence. Longer this time. Then he asked quietly, What do you want us to do? That question, it stayed with me. Because for so long, I had wanted them to ask me that. To actually care about the answer. I opened my eyes. Looked around my apartment. At the life I had been building without them. And I realized something important. I don't want anything right now, I said. He sounded confused. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not asking for anything. Then what's the problem? I took a slow breath. The problem is, I spent years waiting for things to change. And now I'm not waiting anymore. He didn't say anything. And I knew he didn't fully understand yet. But that was okay. Understanding takes time. We ended the call not long after. Again, no big resolution. No sudden emotional moment. Just space. But something about that conversation felt different. For the first time, he had listened. Not completely, not perfectly, but more than before. And I knew that mattered. Weeks went by. Spring started to come in slowly. The cold air softened. The days felt longer, and with each passing day, I felt further away from the person I used to be. The one who waited. The one who hoped. The one who stayed silent. I was becoming someone else. Someone steady, someone clear, someone who didn't need to prove her worth anymore. And then it happened. The moment I had quietly been preparing for. One evening, I came home to find a message from my mom. Not a short one, not a simple greeting, a long message. I sat down before opening it, because I knew this was different. And when I finally read it, I understood exactly why. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I didn't realize how distant we had become. I thought everything was fine because you never complained. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Maybe I should have asked more questions. I miss you, and I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. I read it once. Then again, slowly, carefully, every word. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, just stillness. Because this was the moment where everything could go back to how it used to be. Or the moment where I could choose something different. And I knew whatever I said next would matter. Not just for them, but for me, for the life I had been building, for the boundaries I had finally learned to set. I placed my phone on the table and leaned back in my chair, thinking, not rushing, not reacting, because this time I wasn't answering from pain. I was answering from strength, and that changed everything. I didn't reply to her message that night, not because I wanted to ignore her, not because I didn't care, but because for the first time, I understood that I didn't have to answer immediately. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who rushed, the one who fixed everything before anyone even asked her to. So I made dinner, a simple meal, sat down at my table, and ate in silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was thoughtful, careful. I kept thinking about her words. I miss you. I want to try. Those were things I had wanted to hear for years. And now that I finally did, I wasn't sure what to do with them. After dinner, I cleaned up slowly. Then I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, reading the message again, trying to understand what I felt. Because it wasn't just one emotion. It was many things at once. A small part of me felt relieved. Another part felt cautious. And a deeper part of me felt tired. Tired of going back to the same place. Tired of hoping for change that never lasted. I knew something important in that moment. If I answered the way I used to, everything would go back to normal. Not the good kind of normal. The old one, where I adjusted, where I stayed quiet, where I accepted less than I deserved. And I couldn't do that again. I wouldn't. So I put my phone down, turned off the light, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up with a clear mind. Not confused, not emotional, just steady. I made my tea, sat by the window, and this time, When I picked up my phone, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I opened her message, and I typed slowly. I read your message. I understand what you're saying, but I need to be honest. This didn't start at Christmas. It's been like this for a long time. I paused, then continued. I'm not angry, but I'm also not ready to go back to how things were. I've been working on myself, building my own life, and I need to protect that. I read it once, then added one more line. If you really want to try, it has to be different this time. Not just words. I looked at the message for a few seconds. Then I sent it. And just like that, the truth was out. Not hidden, not softened, just real. The reply didn't come right away. Hours passed. Then a full day, and I didn't check my phone every few minutes. I didn't feel that old anxiety, because I had already said what I needed to say. Her response was no longer something I depended on. When she finally replied, it was shorter. I understand. I will try. That was it. No long explanation. No emotional speech. Just a simple sentence. And strangely, that felt more honest than anything else. Days turned into weeks again. But this time, something changed in the way we spoke. She started calling more. Not often, but more than before. And when she did, she asked questions. Real questions. How is your course going? Are you eating well? Are you getting enough rest? They were simple things, but they were new. And I noticed I didn't react strongly. I didn't suddenly open up completely. I stayed balanced, answered honestly, but didn't give more than I felt comfortable with. Because trust doesn't come back all at once. It builds slowly, just like it breaks. One evening, during one of our calls, she said something unexpected. I told your brother about what happened. I listened quietly. And? I asked. He didn't realize either, she said. He thought everything was normal. Of course he did, because for him, it was. I didn't say that out loud, but I thought it. He wants to talk to you, she added. I paused, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to decide. Did I want that conversation? Was I ready for it? I'll think about it, I said. And I meant it. Because now, I didn't feel pressured. I didn't feel like I had to fix everything at once. I had time to choose, time to move at my own pace, and that was something I had never allowed myself before. A few days later, he called. I looked at the screen, took a breath, and answered. Hey, he said. His voice sounded different, less casual, more careful. How are you? I'm good. There was a short pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. I didn't know you felt that way. I leaned against the wall. I know. I just thought you were okay. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I know. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just honest. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That word, it stayed in the air for a moment. Not heavy, not dramatic, just real. And I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not in the way I thought at the beginning. This wasn't about making them suffer. It was about something deeper, something quieter. It was about making them see, truly see, and now they were starting to. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to change something. I appreciate that, I said. And I meant it. Because growth, even small growth, matters. We talked a little longer. Nothing big, nothing emotional, just a conversation. And when the call ended, I didn't feel drained. I didn't feel upset. I just felt steady. That night I sat by the window again, looking at the city lights, and I thought about everything that had happened. The message, the silence, the distance, the change. And I understood something clearly. The real revenge wasn't cutting them off. It wasn't hurting them. It wasn't proving them wrong in a loud, dramatic way. The real revenge was becoming someone who no longer needed them to feel whole, someone who could walk away and still be okay. And because of that, everything else started to fall into place. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. There were still quiet days, still moments where old memories came back, still times when I wondered why it had taken so long for them to see me. But those thoughts didn't control me anymore. They came, and then they passed. Like everything else, weeks turned into months. My course ended, and I passed with results I was proud of. I even got a better opportunity at work, a position I wouldn't have believed I could handle before. But now, I didn't doubt myself the same way. Because somewhere along the way, I had learned to trust myself. Not their opinions. Not their approval. Just myself. My relationship with my family changed too. Not in a perfect, happy way, but in a real way. My mom called more often. And when she did, she listened. Sometimes she still slipped back into old habits. Short replies, distraction, but now I noticed it. And more importantly, she noticed when I pulled back. She would correct herself. Try again. It wasn't easy, but it was different. My dad became quieter but more present. He didn't say much, but when he did, it felt like he was actually thinking about his words. And my brother, he changed the most. Not all at once, but slowly. He stopped asking about gifts. Started asking about me, small things at first. How's your day? Did you eat? It might sound simple, but for me, it meant everything. Because it was new. It was effort. And I could tell. It wasn't forced. It came from understanding. One evening, a few months later, my mom called me again. Her voice sounded different, softer. We were thinking, she began, we'd like you to come home. Not for a holiday, just whenever you're ready. I sat quietly for a moment, because this wasn't like before. There was no pressure, no expectation, just an invitation. On my terms. I'll think about it, I said. And she didn't push. Okay, she replied gently. Take your time. After the call ended, I sat there, holding my phone, thinking about everything. About who I used to be. The girl who would have packed her bags immediately. The girl who would have rushed back, hoping everything was fixed. But I wasn't her anymore. I had changed. Not in a loud way. Not in a way people would notice instantly. But in a deep, quiet way. The kind that stays. A few days later, I made my decision. Not because they asked. Not because I felt guilty. But because I wanted to. I called my mom. I'll come for a short visit, I said. There was a pause. Then I heard the relief in her voice. Okay, that's good. When I arrived at the house a week later, everything looked the same. The same door, the same walls, the same familiar feeling, but I wasn't the same person walking through it. My mom opened the door. For a second, we just looked at each other, no words. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like the hugs I used to imagine, but it was real. And that was enough. Inside, my dad nodded at me with a small smile. My brother gave me an awkward hey before pulling me into a quick hug. It felt strange, but not in a bad way. Just new. We sat together, talked, shared a meal. Nothing dramatic happened. No big emotional scene. No sudden fixing of everything. Just effort from all of us. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible in that house. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't feel like I had to stay quiet. Because now, I knew my worth. And more importantly, I knew I could walk away if I ever needed to again. That was the difference. That was the power. Later that night, I stood in my old room, looking around at the memories, at the past, and I realized something that made me smile quietly. I didn't need revenge anymore. Not even the quiet kind, because the truth had already done its job. They saw me now. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And I saw myself too. Clearly. For the first time. And that was more than I had ever asked for. Before I went to sleep, my phone buzzed. A notification from one of my apps. But I ignored it. Because for once, I didn't need a distraction. I didn't need to escape. I was exactly where I chose to be. And that made all the difference. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt unseen or left behind by the people who were supposed to love you, remember this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop chasing and start choosing yourself. If you believe in stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and support the channel. And most importantly, subscribe to YH Night Stories for more real emotional journeys like this one.